I'm Rachel Johnson, co-host of the EduGals podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Teaching While Queer is a podcast for 2S LGBTQ+ educational professionals to share their experiences in academia. Hi, I'm your host, Brian Stanton, a theater pedagogue and educator in New York City, and my goal is to share stories from around the world from 2S LGBTQ+ educators. I hope you enjoy Teaching While Queer. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Teaching While Queer. I am your host, Brian Stanton. My pronouns are he, they, and today I get the pleasure of working with a fellow musician and speaking with a fellow musician. I'd like to introduce you all to Am're Ford. Hi, Am're. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, Brian?
I'm doing great, thank you. I'm so excited that you're able to join me this evening. Do you mind telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Am're. My pronouns are he, him. I am from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. I'm born and raised there. I've been in music all of my life, in church all of my life. We could get to that, I guess, a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I went to a performing arts high school, and I knew from the time I was in third grade that I wanted to be a teacher. And then I had this really cool kind of like right out of grad school teacher. And I was like, oh, I can teach music and it can be fun. So I went to school, majored in education. At the last second, switched to performance, got a music composition degree. I got a master's in that, then came back and kind of took the alternative route to classroom teaching. Since a lot of my college coursework was in education. So I taught public school for 3 years and then private school for 2 years. And then now I am the conductor of a youth orchestra in North Tulsa, which is a part of Tulsa that's predominantly and historically Black.
That's awesome. I appreciate your journey so much because I, as a music student in college, also took the music education to performance route. I feel like maybe these music ed programs need to kind of assess what's going on because a ton of us are switching over to performance and then finding our way back to teaching, as it were. But yeah. I'm like kindred spirits. I know so many people who have done that kind of route where they're I was going to be a choral conductor, right? Like that was my drive. I was going to be a choir director. And then I started focusing on performance and got my degree in performance and then ended up in theater because that was really what my passion was. So it's really funny that like this route kind of exists for a lot of music majors, as it were. So for those of you who are listening, who are getting ready for, college, remember that the plan can change.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about what it was like for you as a queer student. You grew up in Oklahoma, which is, a very, at least from what I understand, is a very conservative space. So what was it like for you as a queer student?
It was, I think, now that I look back, like kind of scary. Growing up Black and like my grandfather was a pastor and like started a church. So that's like a whole other thing that's like part of this conversation as well. And I think that there are maybe still parts of me that presented like is like what is like the word that you can say to that might make something obvious or like stereotyped as obvious?
It's not inconspicuous. Is it conspicuous?
Yeah. So like, there are parts that present it that way, but yeah, it just wasn't like a safe space. And really up through graduate school, like I went to graduate school in Greensboro, North Carolina,
Oh yeah, you know.
pretty far from Oklahoma. It's the only school that I applied to. I got in and I went. And it's interesting, like when I met, there's some friends that I met while I lived there, and when we talk now, they had no idea that I was like quote unquote in the closet because when I got to Greensboro, I was just like really living. And I didn't care, especially once I like worked through the shame and all of that. I was just like, okay, like this is what it is. Um, so yeah, that was kind of the point where I'm just like, this is who I am, and you can take it or leave it. But if you leave it, please like leave now.
Does that shame derive from the church?
um, yeah, I mean, I heard very homophobic rhetoric that allegedly it's the way that they interpreted the Bible.
Hmm.
And so it has also helped to kind of learn that there's a lot more context. And some of that context means that people just put homosexual in there like 60 years ago or something like that.
Hmm.
So once I discovered that, I was like, oh, this is like, don't talk to me because if you can't put that context together, we can't have a conversation. Um, so yeah, that was also that helped to aid in my liberation, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. I know I've talked to a lot of people about just kind of that intersectionality of religion and sexuality and kind of how that makes growing up more difficult. And I am lucky that I did not have to have that experience. I also
Mm.
talked with someone last year who said that her brother struggled with coming out because there was this like a triple intersectionality within their family, which was the
Mm.
idea of masculinity in the black community as well as church, and then being a queer person, he had this kind of like trifecta of issues to work through, and most of the stuff isn't even um, from him. It's not like his baggage. It's like the world's baggage. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think even recently I've thought about like some of the ways that they impacted me. Like my best friend got married. He asked me to be his best man. I was like, oh, but like I need to let you know, like I'm gay. And he was like, okay. So I still want you to be my best man. And looking back, I'm like, why did I think that he was going to be like, yeah, you can't be my best man because you're gay? Well, internalize. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Internalized homophobia is such a weird thing too, because it's like it is us kind of like taking societal messages and believing them, and I think
Hmm.
that's one of the things that drives me crazy right now, is that like so much of the world is saying that like our sexuality and our gender identity are who we are. It's 100% of who we are. And that's the kind of situation that you are in, that you were like, oh gosh, this is who I am. And because this is who I am, then, and it's not who they thought I was, like everything's going to be different. But really,
Yeah.
this is just like a portion. It's like a small part of our identity.
Yeah. And like, even I think that concept I've kind of struggled with for a while because it's like a part of me, but it's a part of me that is like attacked a lot. So then it's like, well, it's a small part, so should I be talking a whole lot about it, or just kind of finding the balance. But I think even that, right, is like an internalized message
Yeah.
about like what I should be speaking up about and how I should feel, and yeah.
Well, thinking about your experiences as a child, how has that impacted you as an educator?
Yeah, I think I tend to lean on the side of grace to figure out like what's going on. Because I can think of, I mean, instances even where maybe I wasn't the focus of like the attention, but I knew kind of like the context of what was happening. And I don't know, I think I've just been able to see things that uh an experience like I don't think as a child like from adults that I received like homophobic like words or which grateful for that. But I tend to be kind and like give students a chance to develop the muscle that I feel like a lot of us don't like have a chance to like develop these skills that we say we want students to develop. And it's like, okay, they got to practice those skills, but we don't give them the chance to practice. And then they become an adult and it's like, all right, you're an adult now. Why are you still doing that?
Hmm.
So I've spent a lot of time recently just like trying to give students the space and ask questions that get them to come up with the solutions that they can implement, without me having to always be the one controlling the things. And um, sometimes it is a little terse.
Hmm.
Um, Even recently, like in my orchestra rehearsal, it's essentially a classroom with like 12 kids from different places, some that I taught before and some that I haven't. And I'm just like, y'all, this is a little chaotic. Like, don't you agree? Okay, we all have to do something different, including me, because I can't do this. I also do not yell when I talk to my students. I talk to like this when I'm happy with them. There's a little bit more excitement and brightness, but yeah, and I try to remember that they are also humans and to like treat them with kindness and respect and um yeah, those are the things that I think really probably experiences in my childhood that reflect or help to shape um, some of my views now as an educator.
So, as a conductor and educator, have you ever had to deal with anti-queer behavior, whether it was in one of your orchestras or ensembles, or a parent or community member?
Um, oh, I have it right here. So there's this poster.
The poster for everybody who is listening says, "In this classroom, we believe that Black Lives Matter, love is love, science is real, feminism." I can't read the bottom of it; my glasses are off. So you wanna post
Yeah,
it for me?
feminism is for everyone. Humans are not illegal. Kindness is everything.
It's a beautiful poster, folks.
Yeah, so a friend of mine in the building was like, "Hey, I bought this. Do you want me to get one for you?" So did the whole thing, and there were some other people that I discovered also had the poster. And the reason that I knew that they also had the poster is because we had a meeting about the poster.
Of course.
Because there were things on the poster that certain people didn't agree with. And when their kid came home, it's like, oh no, we can't have that. So literally, like a meeting with the 8 teachers that had the poster, just like, really, like this is the thing.
It's
This
so
is the
funny to me
thing.
because it's like people are so afraid of a poster or a flag or something like it's what we're teaching. Like you're going into your orchestra and you aren't teaching the students how to read and play music, you are
Yeah,
teaching them what's on this poster. It's literally a poster. Like it's a piece
right.
of paper and it gets so much power right now. It's mind-boggling.
And it's a poster that reinforces that, like, we should treat people like human beings, like all the people, not just the ones that we like or just the ones with money, like all of the humans. So the fact that that is the thing that is like ruffling your feathers, maybe it's you, it's not me.
Yep. And what's interesting to me is right before I left Texas, they passed a law, like for my last school year teaching there was a law passed that is, if someone donated a poster that said "In God We Trust," as long as it had the American flag on it, it had to be posted in wherever, like if the school was given 12, they have to post the 12 up or whatever. And then there's a new law that was being passed that was like all the 10 commandments need to be put up in every classroom. And I was like, yo, this is not how education works. Like, man, if I could teach my students just from the posters on my wall, I would be sitting back doing nothing all day, because I wouldn't have to do the work. The posters did it for me. Like, this is just not how education works, folks.
And that's also not how indoctrination works. Like, you're not even doing it right.
Right. And it's like, and the funny part is that they are doing it right elsewhere, but they aren't doing it. They're like trying to sneak things into the school, and it's like, that's not how it works. And literally what we're teaching is not, it's not how that works. Presenting history is not indoctrination. Reading a book that includes Black people or queer people is not indoctrination. It's just like the reality of the world.
Yeah. And that's like, again, with Oklahoma being very conservative, even like we had a student that I had in 8th grade, and then they went to the high school. So we, worked with all the kids. And once they got to high school, they started to transition and I think use he pronouns. Previously, they used she. And like there was one time when the student wasn't there and they used like the wrong pronouns, and I was like, "Oh wait, like I thought that was he." And they're like, "Oh," I'm just like, "Oh, that was like really not cool that."
Yeah.
When he's not here, you decide to use another pronoun and then you don't know. But
was it like
even
an adult or was it a child?
Yeah, it was the teacher.
That's the wild part to me. Is like, we're supposed to be teaching these kids to have integrity and whatnot, and it's like folks won't even follow it on their own.
But what I found, like, especially here, is that there's a lot of people that have never had to, in a meaningful way, engage with people that are different from them. And they've just been able to navigate and kind of like, wiggle through stuff. And I'm just like, babe, I need you to have a seat and really like think this through. Cause like you said, like we're educators. Please, like let's use those brain cells and think about this.
Yeah. And there's some things happening that are just mind boggling.
Yeah.
I think about like primary sources, and this is just like a cultural shift, I guess, that's happening in how when I was in high school, I was taught that like primary sources were where it was at. If you wanted to say that you researched something, you went to the original document or like the 1 degree of separation from that original document. And like nowadays, I feel like anything's game to be factual, quote unquote, information.
Yeah, I saw something recently where like I think it's a journalist or someone was saying that before they would post about something, they would check like 2 or 3 sources, and now they're checking 5 or 6 because like anything is considered a source. Because there's so much access to creating things, which like there's the creative part of it, and for some people it's really good, but like we live in an age where everybody has a platform. And there are pros and there are some cons.
Yep. It's interesting. I was watching the news earlier. I don't even know where I was to watch the news, but I was watching the news. Maybe it was the gym. And they said that the president had just like signed a new executive order in relation to artificial intelligence and the use of AI, right? And the big takeaway from the news was that too many images are being created and then like marketed as real, but they are being created by computer programming. Full videos and images are being created by AI, and then people are convinced that they're real. And so one of the things they were talking about is like a watermark for AI content or something like that, which I really am like, this is great, but I don't know how you're going to enforce any of this.
Yeah.
But it's along the same lines, right? Of like checking your sources. You can't even trust a picture. You can't trust a picture or a video because it can be absolutely created and edited. Which is why I feel like we have a whole generation of people in their like 20s and 30s who are skeptical and cynical skeptical of everything because we grew up watching this transition happening, whereas those who are younger, it's already happened. You know, this is the world that they live in where anything can be made up and anything can be real.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. What a far cry away from the conversation we were having, though. Interesting talk. But I'm just curious, just like from a I love music kind of perspective, what resources do you use to help kind of like diversify the composers that you work with for your orchestras and whatnot? Do you tend to stick with the canon, or do you actively seek out diverse voices?
So yeah, I do like the opposite of the canon on purpose because I feel like I don't need to teach you about Mozart or Bach because they are household names at this point. So yes, I actively seek out things, and I'm a composer, so I write stuff too for my kids to play. And it helped, especially like the last 2 years that I taught at private school. Is a Black private school. So like, I taught them "We Shall Overcome," which is like a simple song that fits within like an octave or so. So it's pretty easy for beginners to learn. Taught them "Lift Every Voice and Sing," and I do some hip hop as well. So yeah, there's no canon. And sometimes I wonder if I like overcorrect because I'm like, we're not doing none of that. But yeah, I'm learning to find my way back to the middle.
I feel like though there's been so many years, decades, centuries of teaching the same people because even like in my education, it wasn't until college that I started experiencing diverse voices and diverse composers or lyricists or whatever it might have been.
Mm-hmm.
I had the privilege of singing new opera pieces that were being written in the moment because someone did a master class at our school and brought the music with them and whatnot. And so like it was really cool because at that point I was introduced to different perspectives, but like what were my core pieces even in college, Bach, Handel, Mozart,
Yeah.
and then Verdi and Bellini because opera, but it's like it's
Right.
all like a bunch of white dudes,
Yeah.
and some of them just speak different languages, but it's all just a bunch of white dudes that I was singing for the majority of what I was doing. It was like my senior year that I was like, we need to shake this up. We really do.
Yeah. And I think even like I definitely lean towards living composers as well because like the great thing about like all of these people that got to write and get their stuff performed like while they were alive, and there are a lot of people alive writing good music that want to get it performed.
That's the thing that I think is so interesting too, is that you're absolutely correct. These composers are famous because their pieces were performed while they were living. It's not like they died and someone unearthed 300 Bach concertos. Like, they were performed consistently, especially Bach, because Bach worked for the church. So there was like constantly new work being performed once a week. And it's like new composers, living composers aren't giving the same kind of treatment of that. I can think of some opera composers right now who've had like 5 performances in the last decade. And, you know, Mozart...
And some people might say that's good.
Yeah, that's the thing. Some people might say that's good. And Mozart was like, I'm popping out, you know, brand new operas once every 2 years, and they're getting, you know, full productions. And I guess that's like, a part of it has to do with classism, right? Aristocracy. Mozart worked for aristocracy. Bach worked for the church. So these people were funding those ventures, but it's like, I would love to see more new works happening pretty consistently. I guess what I love about theater is because I can kind of see that happening. I do see more new works happening in theater, but I don't see it as much in the big houses when it comes to classical music.
Yeah, I mean, I think opera is taking like a sharp turn that way because their other shows aren't selling.
Yeah,
so they are doing like X. They're doing that again and some other stuff.
It's like here's a 4-hour opera in German, and you have to read the subtitles the whole time, while also watching 70 people move around the stage.
I've done that, like, and watching, like, looking at the super titles while also trying to like look down, like this. At some point, you just like, okay, I think I know what's going on.
Yeah. You're like,
but
during one of the intermissions, I'll just read the synopsis. Then I'll follow along. It's funny because I have subtitles on for everything that I watch on like television.
Oh my god, me too.
And so it's like, there's that meme that's like, I can't hear without my subtitles, and I feel like that's like my life. But when I'm trying to watch that, if they're not well incorporated into the set, if it's just like on a screen above, cannot do it. Like, it's so difficult to kind of watch because the space is too big. And then I've been in productions, because I used to perform with San Diego Opera, where the subtitles were actually like projected onto set pieces. And so you'd be doing a scene on top of this set, and right under where you're standing, the subtitles were projected. And it was super cool, worked into the scenic design. And I think that is the direction that theater as well as opera needs to head, because honestly, so many of us are using subtitles. We should just incorporate them into theater.
That's funny.
Yeah. Anywho, back to, education. This is what we're here for, and geeking out on music. What is some advice that you would give to someone who's brand new to education and they're concerned about whether or not they should be their authentic self?
I will say try your best to be authentic. There are spaces of like safety, and that could be like emotional safety or physical safety or political or whatever, but especially with my students, I found that I formed relationships, and authentic relationships quicker, because I was just myself. Although I wasn't necessarily out to them, I wasn't pretending to like be straight. But yeah, I found that my students really appreciated that I was just real with them, about everything that I could be. And yeah, we got to have a lot of fun while learning. And so, yeah, as authentic as you can be, show up that way. And I think that in the long run, it will pay off, and you'll appreciate that you did it.
Absolutely. And I think there's something to be said about the fact that you can still show up as yourself without coming out. You can still be yourself in the classroom and not have to worry about the specifics of coming out, if that situation works for you. It does not work for me when I worked at the same school that my children attended, right? Because my children are going to talk about having 2 dads. They're not going to be like, my mom. Weird.
Right.
So that doesn't work for me. But for other folks, like, you don't have to tell, and I tell this to my students all the time, that I think that teachers in the classroom or in youth programs or wherever, the adults that are working with students are the best actors in the world, because these kids don't know anything about you, really. Like, they don't know who you are. They know who you allow them to see. And so you're absolutely correct. Like, do what you can do. Be your authentic
I
self as much as possible.
convinced I convinced my middle schoolers that I was like 16 for a couple years. And every time they had like, well, what about this? I had an answer. I'm like, you've never heard about a 16-year-old graduating from college? Look it up right now. 16-year-olds graduate from college. Um, but yeah, because I had, at some point I was like, I don't want you to know anything. And I was like, okay, I'm 33.
I don't want you to know anything. And as a rite of passage, do not tell anybody younger than you that I had this conversation, because next year I'm going to say the same thing.
No, I did that. Actually, yes, with my 8th graders, I was like, you better not say anything.
It's a rite of passage. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about all of your experience, what do you think the education community can do to be more inclusive of 2S LGBTQ plus people?
For people that don't have like any connection or experience, there are lots of really great books you can read. If you're visual, there are lots of great YouTube things. Like this should be like professional development, learning how to engage with and teach other groups of people. And I don't know, like I'm thinking of all these things, but then what's also coming to my mind is that like you're a teacher and it's your job to like know how to best teach your students. So, if I have a student that has just moved from like a different country, I might read up to see like what their customs are so I know what to expect and how to better engage with that student. And I think that for some people, it's just that like you don't want to do it. And so for those people, I'm like, maybe just go. But yeah, read some books, talk to some people, read and do the stuff before you talk though, because they don't get to do the labor. Like you do the labor and then you just like kind of check up. But you read that book, read the videos, and invite people that represent these different groups that aren't present. And like invite them, but also make the space inviting. So don't invite them into like a hostile area or a hostile space. Like, think about those kinds of things. Because you
Yeah, you
might
don't want
want
them to
this
show
really
up and,
bad.
yeah, you might not want them to show up and be like interrogated, like,
Yeah. Do some of that legwork. Use your privilege and talk to them about how to need to do some things differently.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that 100%. And especially that, queer people, Black people, Latine people do not need to educate you. You need to educate yourself. And then ask questions. Ask questions is fine. But ask questions, informed questions.
Yeah.
I'm a huge proponent of all that. Like I'm actually teaching PD shortly on how do we incorporate identity into our curriculum. And it's not just, sexual orientation and gender identity. It's like all identity. Like, what does it mean to have an identity? And then how do you let that show up in a classroom space? So
yeah.
I think that's a huge proponent, especially because like we'll get like foreign exchange students at a high school level, and you'll get people just moving here from other places. And so you're gonna encounter, in most places, you're gonna encounter people who are different than you. So it's important that you understand how to work with people who are different than you. And granted, there are places that feel like a microcosm where there's not a lot of diversity, or if there is diversity, there are systems in place that segregate it. to those people, I reach out. You can't, like, you will be
Absolutely.
doing yourself a disservice to live your whole life without learning about other people's perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely.
At this point, I'm going to turn the mic over to you. We finished the interview with you asking me a question.
If you could wake up tomorrow and sign a bill into law affecting education, what would the bill be?
Um, Off the top of my head, the bill would, because you know how legislators like to pack things into bills. So here's what this bill's going to
Yes,
have. Right,
yes, love
ready?
that.
We're going to pack it in.
Mhm.
The first thing is that for Title IX and Title VII, which Title VII handles workplace protections. Title IX handles child, like protection of child from discrimination in a classroom. Those would include the specific terms gender identity and sexual orientation. So right now, the law says that those things, those two categories, fall under sex discrimination. But that's an interpretation issue, just like we were talking about earlier
Yeah.
with the Bible, right? It's an interpretation issue, and so that can be problematic. The second thing, funding would be more equitable. And this is coming from a perspective that I've taught at schools that have a large Title I population, and I've taught at schools that are in affluent areas. And the way that the funding was distributed was inequitable either way. Like, Title I schools were getting brilliant, brand new buildings, but they didn't have enough teachers, and they didn't have the salaries to be able to get quality teachers into those buildings. Whereas then these other schools might have higher salaries, but like crappy facilities, and so it's like funding would be addressed in a major way. I also think that there needs to be not Common Core, but some sort of standard that is set by the national government. Every single state should not own its own education. That is where we're getting so many problems right now, where we can have like Florida and Texas and Alabama being like, I'm not teaching African American history as an AP course. I'm not doing it. I'm not teaching these things because they talk about a queer person, or they talk about a black person, or they talk about a brown person. That's not okay.
Mhm.
The federal government should be able to say that the curriculum must reflect the country that we live in. So I think that those three things are kind of like baseline what I'd want to see in educational policy. You know, it would be nice to have pay raises, but also, like, I think that pay raises are necessary, but something else that needs to be packed into the bill is the understanding that the educators are the experts. That being a parent does not mean that you have the expertise to know what needs to be taught in a classroom, because you didn't get that degree and you did not focus on that area. And if you did, and you are one of those people who is an educator and a parent like myself, then congratulations. Hopefully you're not raising a storm for other teachers, you know? But I know teachers who are raising a storm for other teachers, and I'm just like, what are you doing? Like, you know what it's like to teach in a classroom. So yeah, we'll say 5 things, right? Teachers are the experts. We're going to protect everyone in the law. We are going to fund schools appropriately and equitably. We're going to universalize education in the extent that there needs to be some sort of standard that everybody is held accountable to in the nation. And it could just be like, these topics have to be taught. Like, I don't need a test. I just need to know that these specific topics have to be taught, and that, like, my state government doesn't have the ability to decide that I don't have to teach them. And then pay raises. Yeah, let's pay the experts what they deserve. Yeah. Thanks. Great question. It's the first time I've got that.
When you mentioned experts, I actually first thought of legislators who get to make laws about education who have no experience. That was my first thought, but I get the parents too.
Both, right? And that's the thing that really drives me crazy is that, like, I cannot run for a school board if I teach in that school board. And most of the people on school boards are parents who have other jobs. They don't actually know anything about education. And yet they're supposed to be making the educational decisions for the whole district. That's mind-boggling to me. There should at least be one, like, an equal representation. It really needs to be more like what a PTA used to be, which was like a representation from parents and teachers to make these
What
decisions.
a PTA used to be. I know that's right, because they don't do that no more.
No, they do not.
Actually, I forgot about that, because it's parent, teacher, but yeah. Whew. Okay. Yeah.
You're 100% correct. I think about, like, again, Texas, right? You can't work at the Texas Board of Education and teach. They want, like, you can retire and hope to get appointed, but, like, they don't want people who are actually doing the job to help make the decisions, which I think is so silly, because it's like, we know what the problems are. We know what the real issues at hand are, and we could help create sustainable solutions. Or you could keep doing the same things that you're doing and it's not going to work. You know.
Right.
We got options, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I just wanted to thank you so much for being on the episode. I really appreciate your thoughtfulness. I love that you took a pause when you thought about each answers, because, like, while I send these questions out to people, like, I'm glad that you took some time and had thoughtful responses. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you all at home or wherever you are for listening to Teaching While Queer. Have a great day. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Teaching While Queer. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Leave a review, and that would help out tremendously. You can also support the podcast by going to www.teachingwhilequeer.com and hit support the show. Thanks so much, and have a great day.